My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 31 years old. And at 9:18 on a Tuesday night, while I was standing in my kitchen staring at a half-burnt frozen pizza I'd completely forgotten about, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Normally I don't answer those. But something about that moment, maybe the timing, maybe the tone of the vibration against the counter, made me pick it up. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then a calm, professional voice said something that made the back of my neck go cold. Is this the registered owner of a black 2017 Toyota Camry license plate K8D492? I blinked. Yes. Why? Another pause. Sir, this is Officer Ramirez with the County Police Department. Your vehicle has been involved in an incident tonight. An incident. It's funny how your brain tries to soften words like that. Incident could mean anything, a parking ticket, a fender bender, someone scraped a mailbox. So I laughed a little, awkwardly. Oh, yeah. My friend actually borrowed it tonight. What happened? The silence on the other end stretched just a little too long. Then the officer said something that made the kitchen feel suddenly smaller. Sir, where exactly are you right now? I remember staring at the oven clock while he asked that. 9:19, still blinking. At home. Why? Another pause. Then he said very slowly, Your vehicle was found abandoned about 20 minutes ago, 2 miles from a reported hit and run. That's the moment the pizza started smoking. In the oven, and I didn't even notice, because my brain was stuck on one sentence, hit and run. I didn't say anything for a few seconds because there was only one person driving that car tonight, my best friend, Tyler Brooks. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever had one of those friendships where you trust someone so completely, you'd hand them the keys to your entire life without thinking twice? That was Tyler. We met 12 years earlier in college when he sat next to me during a statistics class neither of us wanted to be in. Within 20 minutes, we were both joking about how the professor looked like a tired substitute teacher who accidentally wandered into the wrong building. By the end of that semester, we were inseparable. Roommates, road trips, late-night gaming, sessions. The kind of friendship where your parents start calling the other person their second son. Tyler was the guy who helped me move apartments 3 different times. The guy who stayed up all night with me after my breakup with my ex. The guy who once drove 4 hours just to help me fix a transmission problem in the middle of winter. So yeah, when he texted me that afternoon asking to borrow my car, I didn't hesitate. His message was simple. Hey man, my truck's in the shop. Any chance I can use your car tonight? Just need to run a couple errands. That was it. No explanation, no drama. And I just replied, yeah, grab the keys, they're on the hook. That was at 5:02 p.m. The last time I saw him in person was maybe 10 minutes later. He walked into my apartment, grabbed the keys, and thanked me like he always did. Quick smile, quick wave. Nothing weird, nothing suspicious. If you had asked me at that moment whether Tyler Brooks would ever put me in a situation involving police officers and a hit-and-run investigation, I would have laughed. But now I was standing in my kitchen with a police officer on the phone asking questions about my car. And suddenly, every normal memory from that afternoon started replaying in my head like it was hiding something. Sir? The officer said. I snapped back. Yeah, sorry. What happened exactly? There was paper shuffling on his end of the line. All we know so far, he said, is that a pedestrian was struck about 30 minutes ago. Witnesses reported a black sedan leaving the scene. My stomach dropped. A pedestrian? Yes. Are they okay? Another pause. Then the officer said something that made my grip tighten around the phone. They're in critical condition. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Because now this wasn't just a damaged car. Or a police report. Somebody had been hit, and the vehicle that fled the scene was mine. I swallowed hard. Officer, I swear I wasn't driving that car tonight. I understand, he said calmly, which is why I need you to tell me who was. And that's when I said the name that would completely unravel the next 2 weeks of my life. Tyler Brooks. There was typing on the other end. Then the officer asked the question that made my stomach twist. Do you know where Mr. Brooks is right now? I looked at the empty parking space outside my apartment window, the place where my car should have been. No, I said quietly. I don't. And what I discovered about Tyler later that night made me realize the police calling me was only the beginning of the problem. For the next few seconds, the officer didn't say anything. All I could hear was faint typing and the low crackle of police radio chatter somewhere in the background. Then he asked, "When was the last time you spoke to Mr. Brooks?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to steady my thoughts. "Earlier this evening, around 5, he came over to pick up the car." "And you haven't heard from him since?" "No." That wasn't entirely unusual. Tyler had always been the kind of person who disappeared for hours when he was running errands. Sometimes he'd get distracted, meet up with someone, grab food somewhere random. But now, suddenly that normal behavior didn't feel so normal anymore. The officer continued asking questions. What was Tyler wearing? Did he seem upset about anything? Did he mention where he was going? And the weird part was, I didn't have answers. I kept replaying the moment in my head. Tyler walking into my apartment, keys jingling in his hand. That quick smile. But the more I thought about it, the more something started to bother me. There was something slightly off. At the time, I ignored it, but now it kept scratching at the back of my mind. He'd been rushed. Not panicked exactly, just impatient. Like he had somewhere important to be. "Sir?" the officer said again. "Are you still there?" "Yeah, sorry. I'm going to need you to come down to the station tonight to give a statement." That sentence made my heart start beating faster. "Wait, am I in trouble?" "No," he said calmly. "Right now you're simply the registered owner of a vehicle connected to an investigation." Connected to an investigation. That phrase didn't make me feel any better. We scheduled a time for me to come in within the hour. Then the officer said something else that stuck with me. "If Mr. Brooks contacts you, please notify us immediately." "I will." We hung up, and suddenly my apartment felt incredibly quiet. The oven beeped behind me, reminding me the pizza inside had completely burned. I turned it off, opened the door, and smoke drifted out. I didn't even care. Instead, I grabbed my phone and opened my messages. Tyler's name sat at the top of the conversation. Last message from him. "Thanks again, man. I'll bring it back tonight." Sent 5:11 p.m. That was it. No updates, no check-ins, no, "Hey, I'm running late." Nothing. I typed quickly. "Dude, where are you? Police just called me about my car." I stared at the screen, waiting. The little delivered notification popped up, but the typing bubble never appeared. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still nothing. At that point, I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The police station was about 15 minutes away, and the drive there felt surreal. Every red light felt longer than usual. Every passing car made me tense up. My brain kept asking the same question over and over. What happened tonight? Because Tyler wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type of person who'd hit someone and just drive away. At least, that's what I thought. When I arrived at the station, Officer Ramirez met me in the lobby. He looked exactly how you'd imagine a veteran police officer would look. Mid-40s. Serious expression. The kind of face that had clearly delivered bad news many times before. "Daniel Carter?" he asked. "Yeah." He shook my hand briefly and led me into a small interview room. Inside was a metal table, 2 chairs, and a recorder sitting between them. "Just routine," he said as he pressed a button. Then he began asking me to recount everything again. When Tyler borrowed the car, where he might have gone, whether he'd been drinking recently. And that last question caught me off guard. "Drinking?" I asked. "Yes. Any substance use you're aware of?" "No. Tyler doesn't even drink much. At least, not lately." That was another thing. 2 years earlier, Tyler had gone through a rough breakup. For a few months after that, he drank more than usual, but eventually he pulled himself together. New job, gym routine, health kick. Honestly, he seemed like he was doing better than ever. Which is why none of this made sense. The officer nodded slowly as I finished answering. Then he slid a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this location?" It was a dimly lit street corner, Yellow police tape, an ambulance, and right in the middle of the photo, my car. The front bumper was dented, the windshield cracked. I felt my stomach drop. That's my car. Yes, he said. Witnesses reported it speeding away after impact. I swallowed hard. Did they see the driver? Not clearly. Then he added something that made the room feel colder. But someone did report seeing a man exit the vehicle briefly before leaving the scene. I frowned. Exit the vehicle? Yes. My brain struggled to process that. Why would Tyler stop, get out, and then leave? It didn't make sense. Unless... Did he check on the person? I asked. The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into a folder and pulled out another photo. This one made my chest tighten, because it showed the inside of my car, and scattered across the passenger seat were several small plastic bags, white powder inside them. My heart started pounding. Officer, I said slowly, that's not mine. He studied my reaction carefully. I'm aware of that possibility. Tyler must have... I understand, he said. But then he leaned forward slightly and asked the question that changed everything. Mr. Carter, are you absolutely certain you know what your friend has been involved in lately? Because the truth was, I thought I did. But the next thing the officer told me about Tyler Brooks made me realize I might not have known my best friend at all. For a moment, I just stared at the photograph. The little plastic bag scattered across my passenger seat looked completely out of place, like someone had taken a normal, ordinary object from my life and dropped it into the middle of a crime scene, my car, my name on the registration, but something inside it that I had never seen before. I swear, I said again, my voice quieter this time. Those aren't mine. Officer Ramirez nodded slowly. I believe you. That surprised me. But, he continued, they were found inside your vehicle. My stomach twisted. How many? 7 small bags. I leaned back in the chair trying to process that. 7. That didn't sound like someone casually carrying something around. That sounded like dealing. And suddenly a thought crept into my head that I didn't want to entertain. Had Tyler been using my car for something illegal? No, that couldn't be right. Tyler worked in IT for a logistics company. He had a normal apartment, normal routines, normal everything. He wasn't the kind of guy who ran drugs around the city. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The officer tapped the photograph lightly. These were found after the vehicle was abandoned. Abandoned where? In a parking lot behind a closed grocery store. 2 miles from the accident scene, which meant Tyler had driven away from the hit and run and then ditched my car. That realization made my chest tighten. Did you find him? I asked. No. Any idea where he went? The officer shook his head. Not yet. A silence settled between us. Then he asked something that seemed simple at first. Has Mr. Brooks been under any unusual stress recently? I thought about that, and the truth was, not really. Tyler had actually seemed pretty good lately. A few weeks ago, we'd grabbed dinner together and he'd talked about possibly getting promoted at work. He even joked about finally upgrading from his old pickup truck, which made this whole situation feel even stranger. Because if Tyler was secretly involved in something illegal, he'd hidden it perfectly. Or maybe I just hadn't been paying attention. The officer shut the folder and leaned back in his chair. For now, he said, you're not being charged with anything. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But, he added, your car will remain in police custody while we investigate. That's fine. Honestly, the car was the least of my worries at that point. What about the person who got hit? I asked quietly. The officer's expression hardened slightly. They're still in surgery. That hit me harder than anything else, because suddenly the situation felt less like a mystery and more like a tragedy. Somebody out there was fighting for their life, and my car had been the weapon. After another few questions, the interview ended. Officer Ramirez walked me out to the lobby. "If Tyler contacts you," he reminded me again, "call us immediately." "I will." Then I stepped outside. It was nearly midnight. The air felt colder than when I'd arrived. And as I stood in the parking lot, I pulled out my phone again. Still no response from Tyler. No calls, no texts, nothing. That's when a new thought hit me. Tyler had an apartment across town. Maybe he'd gone home. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe there was some explanation for all of this. So I got in my car, well, my backup car, the old sedan I kept for emergencies, and drove across the city. The entire way there, I kept hoping I'd see his truck parked outside his building. But when I pulled into his apartment complex, his parking space was empty. I walked up to his door and knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then I tried the handle. Locked. I stepped back, staring at the door. Something about the silence felt wrong. Tyler's place was usually noisy. Music, TV, something. But tonight, nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed something sitting near the doormat. A small folded piece of paper. My name was written on it. Just one word. Daniel. My stomach tightened as I picked it up. The paper was creased like it had been folded quickly. Inside was a short handwritten message. And the moment I read it, my heart started pounding. Because Tyler had written, "If the police contact you, don't tell them anything about tonight." I read the line again. And again. My brain struggled to process it. Because that sentence meant one thing. Tyler knew what had happened. He knew the police would call me. And somehow, he'd planned for it. But the next line in the note was even worse. It said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I stood there in the hallway, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Because suddenly the situation felt a lot bigger than a hit and run. Tyler wasn't just hiding, he was running. And the question that kept echoing in my head was the one I was almost afraid to ask. What exactly had my best friend gotten himself into? And more importantly, why did it feel like he was trying to pull me into it too? I stood there in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the note in my hand. The fluorescent lights above me hummed quietly, and somewhere down the corridor a television played behind a closed apartment door. But all I could focus on were those two sentences. "If the police contact you, don't tell them anything about tonight." I didn't mean for any of this to happen. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat, because suddenly the situation felt completely different. Before, I thought Tyler had panicked after an accident. Now it sounded like he had known something bad was going to happen, or at least something risky. I read the note again, looking for any clue I might have missed. But that was it. No explanation, no apology, no "call me," just a warning. I folded the paper slowly and slid it into my jacket pocket. And that's when another realization hit me. If Tyler had left this note here, he must have come back to his apartment after the accident. Which meant he had time. Time to think. Time to write this message. Time to disappear. My first instinct was to call him again. So I pulled out my phone and tapped his name. The call rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Tyler. Leave a message." The normal sound of his voice made the whole situation feel surreal. "Tyler," I said after the beep, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's me. The police already called. I need to know what happened tonight. Just call me back." I hung up and stared at the phone. Still nothing. At that point, a thought crossed my mind that made my stomach turn. The officer had asked me to notify them if Tyler contacted me. But he hadn't said anything about finding a note. And the note clearly showed Tyler knew the police were involved. Which meant, technically, this could be important evidence. I stood there debating what to do. Part of me wanted to drive straight back to the police station and hand the note over. But another part of me, an uncomfortable, conflicted part, hesitated. Because Tyler wasn't just some random guy. He was my best friend. The guy who had been there for me for more than a decade. And something about the tone of the note didn't feel like a criminal mastermind covering his tracks. It felt like someone who had made a terrible mistake. Before I could make up my mind, a door down the hall opened, An older woman stepped out with a small dog on a leash. She glanced at me standing outside Tyler's apartment. "You looking for Tyler?" she asked casually. My head snapped up. "You know him?" "Oh, sure," she said. "He lives there." She pointed at the door behind me. "I'm Mrs. Delaney, across the hall." I walked a little closer. "Have you seen him tonight?" She frowned slightly, thinking. "Well, actually, yes." My heart skipped. "When?" "About an hour ago, I think. That would have been around 10:30 p.m., which meant Tyler had come back here after abandoning my car." "What was he doing?" I asked. The woman shrugged. "He looked like he was in a hurry. Ran inside for a few minutes, then left again." "Did he say anything?" "No." She paused. "But he did ask me something strange." "What?" She tightened her grip on the dog's leash. "He asked if I'd seen anyone looking for him." That sentence sent a chill down my spine. "Anyone like who?" "I don't know. I told him no." She tilted her head slightly. "Everything okay?" I forced a quick smile. "Yeah, just trying to get in touch with him." She nodded and continued down the hall with her dog. I stood there, frozen, because that detail changed everything. Tyler wasn't just hiding from the police, he thought someone else might be looking for him too. And suddenly the image of those plastic bags in my car came rushing back. Drugs. If Tyler had been carrying those around, there was a very good chance they didn't belong to him, which meant there might be other people involved. Dangerous people. People who might also be wondering where those bags ended up. I suddenly felt very exposed standing in that hallway, so I turned and walked quickly back to the parking lot. The cold air outside helped clear my head a little, but as I got into my car, my phone buzzed. A new message from Tyler. My hand shook slightly as I opened it. The message was only 3 words. "We need to talk." Then, a second message appeared, an address, and one final line that made my chest tighten. "Come alone." I stared at the message for a long time. The screen of my phone glowed in the dark interior of the car, lighting up those 2 words over and over in my mind. Come alone. Tyler had never texted like that before. Normally his messages were casual, short jokes, random memes, things like, "Pizza tonight?" or "You still owe me for that game." But this felt different. Serious. Urgent. I checked the address he sent. It was on the edge of town. An old industrial area near the river where most of the warehouses had closed years ago. I knew the place. Half the buildings were abandoned, which made my stomach twist a little. Because if Tyler wanted to talk somewhere quiet, he had plenty of other options. Coffee shops, parks, my apartment. But instead, he chose a place where nobody would see us. I typed a reply. "What's going on, Tyler? The police already called me." The typing bubble appeared almost instantly, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, his message came through. I know. That was it. No explanation. Just 2 words. My heart started pounding again. "Did you hit someone?" I typed. This time there was a longer pause, nearly 30 seconds. Then his response appeared. "It's not what you think." I let out a frustrated breath. That was the most Tyler answer possible. Vague, unhelpful. I typed again. Then explain. Another pause, then another message. "I will, but not over the phone." I leaned back in the seat, rubbing my forehead. Everything about this situation felt wrong. The hit and run, the drugs in my car, the note. And now a secret meeting in an abandoned warehouse district. But there was also one thing I couldn't ignore. Tyler had asked to meet me, which meant he trusted me, or needed me, or both. And despite everything that had happened tonight, a part of me still believed there had to be some explanation. So I started the car. The drive took about 20 minutes. The city gradually thinned out until the streets became darker and quieter. Old factories loomed in the distance. Broken windows, rusty fences. The kind of area that felt forgotten. The address Tyler sent led to a cracked parking lot beside a large brick warehouse. Only one dim streetlight worked. I pulled in slowly, and that's when I saw him. Tyler was standing near the entrance of the building, hands in his jacket pockets, looking around nervously. The moment my headlights hit him, he stepped forward, and even from inside the car, I could tell something was wrong. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy, his eyes red. I parked and stepped out. For a moment, we just stared at each other, 12 years of friendship hanging silently in the air. Then I said the first thing that came to my mind. Tyler, what the hell happened tonight? He ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. I shook my head. The police found drugs in my car. He looked down immediately, which told me everything. Tyler? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked a few steps away and looked out toward the dark river beyond the warehouses. I never meant for you to get involved, he said quietly. That's funny, I replied, because right now I'm very involved. He turned back toward me. His face looked scared, and I'd never seen Tyler scared before. Those bags weren't supposed to be in your car, he said. Then whose are they? He hesitated. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. They belong to someone who's going to be very angry when they realize they're gone. The wind moved through the empty lot, rattling a loose metal sign nearby. I crossed my arms. Start explaining. Tyler looked around again, like he expected someone to appear out of the darkness. Then he lowered his voice. 3 weeks ago, I made a really stupid decision. What kind of decision? He swallowed hard. The kind that involves people you don't say no to. My chest tightened. Tyler, who are you talking about? He looked straight at me and said 2 words that made the entire situation suddenly feel 100 times more dangerous. Drug traffickers. My brain struggled to process that. You're joking. I wish I was. He stepped closer, his voice tense. I needed money fast. Someone at work introduced me to a guy who said I could make quick cash doing deliveries. My stomach dropped. Deliveries? Tyler nodded slowly. I didn't ask questions at first. But tonight, he continued, something went wrong. What do you mean wrong? He looked at me with guilt written all over his face. Tonight, someone tried to stop me. My heart started pounding again. The person who got hit, I said slowly. Tyler closed his eyes. For a second, they stepped into the road. I swerved. I didn't even realize I clipped them until I heard the sound. The words hung in the cold air. And you ran, I said. He nodded. I panicked. And the drugs? He looked back toward the warehouse. I dumped the car because the people I was delivering for, they're going to realize the shipment never arrived. I felt a chill run down my spine. And when they do, he said quietly, they're going to come looking for it. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could, a pair of headlights suddenly turned into the parking lot behind us. Tyler's face went pale instantly, because the car pulling in was not mine. And judging by the way Tyler whispered, "Oh no," it wasn't the police either. The headlights swept across the empty lot and landed directly on us. For a moment, neither Tyler nor I moved. The engine of the incoming car idled loudly in the silence of the abandoned warehouse district. Tyler's entire body went rigid, and that was the moment I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just nervous, he was terrified. Tyler? I whispered. Who is that? His eyes stayed locked on the approaching vehicle. I think that's them. My stomach dropped. The car rolled closer, gravel crunching beneath its tires. A black SUV. Dark windows. No license plate on the front. It stopped about 30 feet away from us. The engine stayed running. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. Mid-40s maybe. Broad shoulders, black jacket. The kind of person who didn't need to raise his voice to make people nervous. 2 more doors opened behind him. 2 other men got out. And suddenly the empty parking lot didn't feel empty anymore. Tyler muttered under his breath. This is bad. This is really bad. I kept my voice low. Are those the guys you were working for? Yes. Then maybe we should leave. Tyler gave a humorless laugh. They wouldn't have come here if leaving was an option. The tall man walked forward slowly. His boots echoed across the cracked concrete. When he got about 10 feet away, he stopped. His eyes moved from Tyler to me, then back to Tyler again. Tyler, he said calmly. His voice was deep and steady, but there was something underneath it. Something cold. Tyler swallowed. Victor. So now we had a name. Victor. Victor glanced at me again. And who's this? Tyler hesitated. My friend. Victor tilted his head slightly. The friend who owns the car? My heart skipped, because that meant one thing. They already knew. Tyler nodded slowly. Victor sighed like someone mildly annoyed. That complicates things. One of the men behind him stepped forward slightly. You told us the delivery would be simple, the man said. Tyler's voice shook. It was supposed to be. Victor raised a hand and the other man fell silent. Then Victor looked back at Tyler. So, he said calmly, let's talk about what happened tonight. The air felt heavy. Tyler ran a hand through his hair. There was an accident. We heard. You heard? Victor nodded. Police scanners exist, Tyler. That made my chest tighten. Victor continued. Your car was reported in a hit and run. Then it was found abandoned. He stepped closer. And the shipment inside it disappeared. Tyler glanced at me, then back at Victor. I panicked. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he asked a question that made the situation even worse. Where are the bags? Tyler didn't answer. Victor's expression hardened slightly. I'll ask again. He stepped even closer now. Where are the bags? Tyler's voice came out quiet. The police have them. The two men behind Victor exchanged looks. Victor didn't react at first. Then he slowly exhaled. That's unfortunate. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Because I suddenly realized something. These men weren't here to negotiate. Victor rubbed his chin thoughtfully. 7 bags, he said, each worth about $20,000. He looked up. That's $140,000 currently sitting in a police evidence locker. The number hung in the air. Then Victor looked straight at Tyler. You see our problem? Tyler nodded slowly. I can fix it. Victor raised an eyebrow. Oh? Yes. How exactly do you plan to steal narcotics from a police station? Tyler hesitated. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. I know someone who might be able to help. Victor's eyes narrowed. Who? Tyler slowly turned his head and looked at me. My heart stopped. Tyler, I said quietly. Daniel, he said, his voice almost apologetic. He works in cybersecurity. Victor looked interested. Now. Oh? Tyler nodded. He's helped companies break into their own systems to test security before. Victor's gaze shifted to me, and suddenly every ounce of attention in that parking lot was focused on me. Well, Victor said calmly, that sounds useful. I shook my head immediately. No, absolutely not. Tyler stepped closer. Daniel, listen. You dragged me here, I snapped. You didn't tell me I'd be robbing a police station. Victor chuckled softly. I think rob is such an ugly word. The two men behind him smiled slightly. Victor folded his arms. But here's the reality. He pointed casually toward Tyler. This young man owes us a very expensive shipment. Then he pointed at me. And you appear to be the only person in this little story with the skills to help recover it. My pulse was racing. I'm not doing that. Victor studied me for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Fair enough. He turned slightly toward one of the other men. Marco, the man stepped forward. Victor spoke calmly, like he was discussing the weather. Take Mr. Brooks for a short walk. Tyler's face went pale. Victor, wait. But Marco had already grabbed Tyler by the arm. Let go of me. Victor raised a hand. No. Need to panic. Then he looked back at me. Sometimes, he said quietly, people need a moment to reconsider their decisions. Marco began pulling Tyler toward the dark side of the warehouse. Tyler looked back at me, fear all over his face. Daniel, Victor turned to me again. So, he smiled faintly. Would you like to rethink your answer? Because in that moment, I realized something horrifying. If I said no again, Tyler might not come back from that walk. Wait! The word came out of my mouth before I even realized I was going to say it. Marco stopped. Tyler froze halfway across the parking lot, his arms still gripped tightly. Victor slowly turned his head toward me again. His expression hadn't changed, but I could feel the shift in attention immediately. The entire situation now revolved around what I said next. I took a breath. Don't hurt him, I said. Victor tilted his head slightly. That depends. On what? On whether you're about to become helpful. Tyler looked at me, panic all over his face. Daniel, you don't have to. Quiet, Victor said calmly. Then he gestured. Marco held Tyler in place but stopped moving him further away. Victor stepped a little closer to me. Let's be clear, he said. No one here wants unnecessary violence tonight. That sentence was somehow more unsettling than if he'd threatened us outright. Good, I said carefully, because breaking into a police evidence locker is impossible. Victor raised an eyebrow. Impossible? Yes. Everything is impossible until someone intelligent looks at it. I exhaled slowly. I'm not a hacker who steals things. I test security systems for companies. Victor smiled slightly. And tonight you will test one for us. I shook my head again. That's not how it works. Victor sighed like a teacher dealing with a stubborn student. Let me explain something. He gestured toward Tyler. That young man currently owes us $140,000. Then he looked back at me. And right now, you are the only variable in the equation that could reduce that debt. My brain was racing. Because this wasn't just a bad situation. This was the kind of situation where people disappeared. And the worst part was, Victor didn't seem angry. He seemed patient, like someone who already believed the outcome was inevitable. I needed time. So I asked the first question that came to mind. How do you even know the drugs are in evidence? Victor smiled. Because we have someone who listens. Police scanner again. Right, he continued. They mentioned the vehicle was processed and items were logged. So you assume it's there? Victor shrugged. We prefer certainty. I rubbed my forehead. Even if I wanted to help, I had no idea how I could. Breaking into a police building wasn't some movie-style hack. It involved cameras, guards, locked systems, chain of custody tracking. It wasn't just difficult. It was career-ending, prison-level illegal. I can't just magically get into a police evidence room, I said. Victor studied me. Then he asked something that made my stomach drop. Where do you work again, Daniel? I froze, because I had never told him that. Victor smiled faintly. Relax. It wasn't hard to find. He pulled a phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen. Senior cybersecurity consultant. Redbridge Solutions. My chest tightened. That's private information. Victor chuckled softly. Daniel, nothing is private. He slid the phone back into his jacket. You test corporate security systems. Yes. So you already know how buildings secure valuable things. That doesn't mean... It means you understand weaknesses. The wind blew through the empty lot again. Somewhere metal clanged in the distance. Victor stepped even closer now. Let me simplify things. He pointed toward Tyler again. You help us recover the shipment. He paused. And this entire situation disappears. I looked at Tyler. His face was pale, terrified. Then Victor finished the sentence. You refuse. He didn't even finish. He didn't have to. The implication hung heavily in the air. I felt trapped, because the truth was, even if I somehow managed to help them, I'd be committing a serious crime. But if I didn't help them, Tyler might not survive the night. Victor folded his arms. So, He looked directly into my eyes. What will it be? My brain spun through every possible option. Run? Impossible. Fight? 3 of them. Call the police? My phone was in my pocket and Victor was watching me. Then suddenly a different idea appeared. A terrible idea, but maybe the only one that could buy us time. I took a slow breath. Okay. Tyler's head snapped up. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Okay? I'll help you. Tyler immediately shook his head. Daniel, no. Victor raised a hand. Let him speak. I continued. But not tonight. Victor frowned slightly. Explain. Police evidence lockers don't work like in movies, I said. Everything is cataloged, cameras everywhere, multiple officers. Victor listened carefully. So if you rush it, you get caught. And if we don't rush it, then maybe there's a way. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the most important question. How long? I swallowed. A few days. The men behind him exchanged looks. Victor studied me carefully. You're asking for trust. Yes. He glanced at Tyler, then back at me. And what stops you from running to the police tomorrow? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was nothing. Victor smiled slightly. Exactly. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. That's why Tyler will stay with us until the job is done. Tyler's face went white. What? Victor shrugged. Insurance. My stomach dropped, because now the stakes were even higher. Tyler wasn't just in trouble anymore, he was a hostage, and Victor looked at me calmly and said, You have 72 hours, Daniel. Then he gave Marco a small nod, and Marco started pulling Tyler toward the SUV. Tyler struggled. Daniel! The door opened. They shoved him inside. Victor turned back to me one last time. If you value your friend's life, he smiled, faintly. Don't disappoint us. Then he got into the SUV, the engine roared, and the vehicle drove away into the darkness, leaving me alone in the empty warehouse parking lot, with 3 days to figure out how to steal evidence from the police or watch my best friend disappear forever. For a long moment, I just stood there in the empty parking lot. The sound of the SUV faded into the distance until the night was completely silent again. 3 days. 72 hours. That was the deadline Victor had given me. And somehow, in those 72 hours, I was supposed to pull off something that could easily land me in prison, or worse. I got back into my car, but I didn't start it right away. Instead, I stared out at the dark river behind the warehouse. My mind was racing. There were only 3 possible outcomes now. Option 1, I go to the police immediately. Tell them everything. Victor, the drugs, Tyler being taken. But the moment I imagined doing that, another thought hit me. Victor had already known where I worked. He had looked up information about me within minutes. Which meant he had resources, people. If I ran to the police and Victor found out, Tyler wouldn't last a day. Option 2, I disappear. Drive somewhere far away. Ignore everything. But that option made me feel sick just thinking about it. Tyler might have gotten himself into this mess, but he was still my best friend. I couldn't just abandon him, which left option 3, the one I'd already agreed to. Somehow find a way to get those bags out of police evidence. I rubbed my face with both hands. This is insane, I muttered. Then I started the car. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every streetlight seemed harsher. Every passing car made me glance twice. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, it was almost 2 a.m., and I knew there was no chance I'd be sleeping tonight. The moment I walked inside, I opened my laptop. If there was even the smallest chance of doing this, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Police evidence storage wasn't something you could just walk into. There were layers of security. Physical access control, cameras, log systems, chain of custody tracking, and the biggest problem of all, every item logged into evidence had paperwork attached to it, which meant if something went missing, it would be noticed almost immediately. I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't just difficult. It was borderline impossible. Unless... My thoughts stopped. Because something from the conversation earlier suddenly came back to me. Victor had said something. We have someone who listens. Police scanners. That meant they were relying on public information, which meant they probably didn't know something very important. They assumed the drugs were sitting in a police evidence locker. But what if they weren't? I quickly opened the county police department website. Most people wouldn't notice it, but departments often had public records of property handling procedures. And after about 15 minutes of searching, I found something interesting. Very interesting. Items connected to serious criminal investigations weren't always stored at local precincts. Sometimes they were transferred to a central forensic facility, which meant those bags might not even be at the police station Victor was thinking about. They could already be somewhere else. I leaned forward, reading the policy again carefully. Evidence related to narcotics distribution cases was often moved within 24 hours. If that had already happened, Victor's entire plan was based on wrong information. And suddenly an idea started forming in my head. A risky idea. But maybe the only one that could save Tyler without turning me into a criminal. Because if I could convince Victor that I was trying to retrieve the drugs, while secretly helping the police recover the entire trafficking operation, then maybe... My phone suddenly buzzed on the desk. The noise made me jump. A message. Unknown number. My heart started pounding again as I opened it. A photo appeared on the screen. It was Tyler, sitting in what looked like a dimly lit room. His hands tied to a chair, but he was alive. Underneath the photo was a message. 72 hours started 20 minutes ago. Then another message appeared. Don't try anything clever. And finally, we're watching. I stared at the phone, because suddenly the plan forming in my mind became much more dangerous. If Victor really had people watching me, then every move I made from this moment forward mattered. And one mistake could get Tyler killed. I stared at the photo of Tyler for a long time. The image was grainy, probably taken with an old phone camera. The room behind him looked like some kind of storage space. Bare concrete walls, a single hanging bulb casting a harsh shadow behind the chair. But the important part was simple. Tyler was alive. His face looked exhausted, but there was no blood, no visible injuries, which meant Victor was telling the truth about one thing. For now, Tyler was still valuable. I set the phone down slowly and leaned back in my chair. If Victor's people were watching me, then the worst thing I could do right now was panic. So I forced myself to breathe slowly. Think. Because if I was going to pull this off, I needed a plan that did 3 things at the same time. First, convince Victor I was actually trying to recover the drugs. Second, protect Tyler. And third, somehow get the police involved without Victor finding out. It sounded impossible, but the more I thought about it, the more one idea started making sense. I reached for my phone again and opened Tyler's message thread. Then I typed, "I'll do it." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Victor must have been holding Tyler's phone. A new message came back. "Good choice." I typed again, "But I need information." There was a pause. Then another message appeared. "What kind?" I kept my tone calm. "Where the drop was supposed to happen tonight." A longer pause this time, nearly a full minute, then the reply came. "Why?" I expected that question. "Because I need to know how the operation works," I wrote. "I can't fix a problem if I don't understand the system." Another pause. Finally, the answer came. "Warehouse District, Pier 14. I opened a map and searched the location. It was only about 5 miles away, which meant the delivery Tyler was supposed to make had been very close to where we met earlier. I typed again. "And the people you work for, they operate from there?" This time the response was faster. "You ask too many questions." Then another message followed. "Focus on the job." I exhaled slowly. Fair enough. That was probably all the information I was going to get tonight. But honestly, it was enough. Because now I knew something important. Victor and his crew were using the warehouse district for their operations, which meant if the police were, going to catch them. That area would probably be the best place to start. The problem was figuring out how to tip off the police without exposing myself. I stared at my laptop again. Then an idea came to mind. A strange one, but possibly the safest option. I opened the website for the city's anonymous crime tip line. Every police department had one. Most people ignored them. But they existed for situations exactly like this. No name required, no phone number required, just information. I hesitated for a moment. Because once I did this, things would start moving. And if Victor somehow found out, Tyler would be the one paying the price. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. So I started typing. Possible narcotics trafficking operation in warehouse district near Pier 14. I described the SUV, the men, Victor, the location where they had taken Tyler. I didn't mention my name. I didn't mention the car. Just enough information to make the police look in the right direction. Then I hit submit. The message disappeared from the screen. And just like that, the first move had been made. But the truth was, the hardest part was still ahead. Because in the morning, I was going to have to meet Victor again and convince a man who clearly trusted no one that I was working for him, while secretly trying to destroy everything he was running. I closed the laptop and leaned back. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten slightly. Dawn was coming, which meant my 72 hours had officially begun, and I had a feeling the next 3 days were going to be the longest of my life. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, the same images replayed in my mind. Tyler tied to that chair, Victor's calm smile in the parking lot, and those 3 words in the message on my phone, "We're watching." By the time the sun started rising outside my window, I had already gone through at least 10 different plans in my head. Every single one fell apart the moment I imagined Victor finding out. Because that was the real problem. Victor didn't need proof to hurt Tyler. Suspicion alone would be enough. Around 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I opened the message immediately. It was another photo. Tyler again. This time the picture was clearer. He was still tied to the chair, but someone had given him a bottle of water. His face looked pale, but he wasn't injured. Under the photo was a short message. Morning update. Then another one appeared. Victor wants to meet tonight. My heart started beating faster. I typed quickly. Where? A moment later, the reply came. Same place. The warehouse parking lot. That meant I had less than 12 hours to figure out what I was going to tell them. I stared at the screen, thinking. Then I typed again. I need access to my car. 3 dots appeared. Then the reply. Why? That part at least was easy to explain. Because the police took it. I need to know where they processed the evidence. Another pause. Finally, the answer came. They processed it at Central Precinct. That surprised me slightly. If that was true, then the drugs might still be there, which meant my earlier theory about the forensic transfer might not apply yet. Victor's message appeared again. You have a plan? I hesitated, then typed the only answer that would buy me time. Working on it. The typing bubble appeared again almost instantly. Good. Then the final message came. Don't disappoint us. The conversation ended there. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Now the clock was really ticking. Tonight I had to meet Victor again and convince him that I had a realistic way to retrieve the drugs. The problem was, I didn't. Not yet. So I opened my laptop again and started researching Central Precinct. The building layout, security systems, camera placements, publicly. Available information was limited, but I could piece together some things. Front entrance, 2 side access points, underground parking garage, evidence storage located on the 2nd floor. Access restricted to authorized personnel, which meant exactly what I expected. No random civilian was getting anywhere near it. But as I studied the layout more carefully, I noticed something interesting. Evidence didn't go directly into the main storage vault. First, it was processed in an intake room. Items were logged, photographed, and cataloged before being moved. And that room, it was much less secure. Still locked, still monitored, but not a full vault, which meant if someone wanted to intercept evidence before it was permanently stored, that would be the place. I stared at the floor plan. Then slowly an idea began forming. Not a theft. Not exactly. More like a delay. If I could somehow make Victor believe the evidence was still in intake, I could stall him long enough for the police tip to start moving things behind the scenes. Maybe even catch Victor when he tried to act. It was risky. Extremely risky. But it might work. And more importantly, it would keep Tyler alive long. Enough for the police to get involved. By 6:45 p.m., I was back in the car heading toward the warehouse district again. The sky was darkening. Traffic was lighter now. Every mile closer made my stomach tighter. Because tonight wasn't just another conversation. Tonight I had to convince Victor I was worth keeping alive. I pulled into the same cracked parking lot. The same broken streetlight flickered overhead. And just like the night before, the black SUV was already there. 3 figures stood beside it. Victor, Marco, and the third man I'd seen earlier. The moment I stepped out of my car, Victor smiled faintly. Daniel. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Good evening. My pulse was racing, but I kept my voice steady. I think I found a way. Victor's smile widened slightly. Oh? I walked closer. The drugs aren't in the evidence vault yet. That got their attention immediately. Victor's eyebrows lifted. Explain. They're still in intake processing, I said. They log the items before moving them into long-term storage. Victor glanced at Marco, then back at me. And intake security is weaker. I could see the gears turning in his head now. Victor stepped closer. How weak? Weak enough that someone with the right distraction could access the room. The other 2 men exchanged looks. Victor studied me carefully. You're suggesting a timed entry, I said, during shift change. Silence filled the lot for a moment. Then Victor slowly nodded. Interesting. He looked at Marco again. What do you think? Marco shrugged. Could work. Victor turned back to me. And how exactly would you create this distraction? That was the question I had been dreading, because the answer had to sound convincing. But before I could say anything, another car suddenly turned into the parking lot. Headlights swept across all of us. Victor's expression changed instantly. Marco reached inside his jacket, and the SUV doors opened as the other man moved quickly toward them. Because whoever was pulling into that lot right now was not expected, and judging by the way Victor suddenly whispered, "Get ready," something told me. This meeting was about to go very wrong. The headlights rolled slowly across the cracked pavement, lighting up the warehouse walls and the side of Victor's SUV. For a second, nobody moved. Marco's hand stayed inside his jacket. The third man stepped halfway behind the SUV door, like he was ready to use it as cover. Victor's calm expression had completely disappeared. Now he looked alert. Dangerously alert. The incoming car slowed, then stopped about 20 feet away. My heart was pounding. Because I had absolutely no idea who it was. If it was the police, everything could explode instantly. If it was someone else connected to Victor, things could get even worse. The engine shut off. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, mid-30s, thin, nervous-looking. He walked toward us quickly. Victor frowned. Luis? He said. The man nodded. Victor. Marco relaxed slightly, but kept his hand near his jacket. Luis looked slightly out of breath, like he'd rushed there. We have a problem, he said. Victor's eyes narrowed. What kind of problem? Luis glanced at me briefly, then back at Victor. Police activity. The air in the parking lot instantly felt heavier. Victor's voice dropped. Where? Near Pier 14. My chest tightened. Pier 14. The exact place I had mentioned in the anonymous tip. Luis continued. 2 patrol units showed up about an hour ago. Then a detective car. Marco cursed under his breath. Victor turned slowly toward me. And for a moment, I felt the weight of his entire suspicion. You wouldn't know anything about that, he said quietly. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I called the police, I said, do you really think I'd be standing here right now? Victor stared at me, long enough that I could feel sweat forming on the back of my neck. Finally, he looked back at Luis. Did they find anything? Luis shook his head. No raids, just questions. Victor rubbed his chin. Interesting. Then he looked at me again. You see why I don't like delays, Daniel? I told you this was risky, I replied. He considered that for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair point. Luis shifted nervously. There's more. Victor's attention snapped back to him. What? They were asking about a black sedan involved in a hit and run. That made Marco stiffen. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Witnesses? Maybe. Victor exhaled slowly. Things are getting messy. Then he looked at me again. But your little plan might solve several problems at once. My heart skipped, because that meant he was still considering it. Victor walked a slow circle around me. Tell me again about this intake room. I repeated the explanation. Shift change, temporary storage, weaker security. Victor listened carefully. When I finished, he nodded. All right. Then he said something that made my pulse spike. You'll show us. My stomach dropped. What? Victor smiled slightly. You didn't think we'd let you sit at home while we handled the hard part, did you? Marco chuckled. Victor continued. You're coming with us. That was the worst possible outcome. Because if they dragged me anywhere near the precinct during an actual crime, I'd be completely trapped. I never agreed to that, I said carefully. Victor shrugged. Plans evolve. Then he gestured toward the SUV. But don't worry. His smile returned. You won't be alone. Marco stepped forward, and behind him. The rear door of the SUV opened. Tyler was sitting inside. His hands were still tied, but otherwise he looked unharmed. The moment he saw me, relief flashed across his face. Daniel! Victor looked pleased. You see? He tapped the side of the SUV lightly. Motivation. Then he looked back at me. If you help us tonight, he said calmly, your friend walks away. The words hung in the air. Tyler looked at me, shaking his head slightly, but I knew what he was thinking. Don't do it. Victor stepped closer. But if you refuse... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I stared at Tyler, then back at Victor, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The police were already sniffing around Victor's operation because of my tip, which meant things were accelerating faster than I expected, and now Victor wanted to act tonight. I swallowed hard, because if I went with them, there was a very good chance none of us were walking away from the police station. But if I refused, Tyler definitely wasn't walking away from this parking lot. Victor tilted his head. Well? The night air felt colder suddenly, and every second that passed made Marco's grip on Tyler's arm tighten. I took a slow breath, because whatever I said next would decide what happened to all of us. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. The wind moved through the empty lot, rattling a loose metal sheet somewhere on the side of the warehouse. Tyler looked at me from the back of the SUV. His hands were still tied, but he was shaking his head slightly. Don't do it. I knew exactly what he meant. If I went with Victor tonight, this could spiral into something much worse than a hit-and-run investigation. It could turn into an armed confrontation with police, and nobody wins those. But if I refused, Victor wouldn't hesitate. I took a slow breath and looked at him. All right, I said. Tyler immediately shouted, Daniel, no! Victor raised a hand. Marco tightened his grip on Tyler. Let him finish, Victor said calmly. I continued. I'll go. Victor smiled slightly. But we do this my way. His eyebrows lifted. Oh? Yes, I said. If this goes wrong, you lose everything. Victor folded his arms. I'm listening. The evidence? Intake room has cameras, I explained. If 3 strangers walk in, the police respond immediately. Marco muttered. He's got a point. So what's your solution? Victor asked. I go in alone. Victor studied me carefully. And you walk out with the bags? Yes. And what stops you from running straight to a detective? Because you'll still have Tyler. That part was true. Victor looked back at Tyler in the SUV, then back at me. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. That's reasonable. Marco didn't look convinced. You really trust him? Victor shrugged. Trust has nothing to do with it. Then he turned to me. You go in, you retrieve the shipment. He tapped the roof of the SUV. And your friend waits here until you return. Tyler's face went pale. Victor. Quiet. Victor looked back at me. How long? I pretended to think. 30 minutes. Victor checked his watch. Then we drive. Marco untied Tyler's hands but kept him seated in the SUV with the door open. Victor gestured toward my car. Lead the way. 20 minutes later, we were parked 2 blocks from Central Precinct. The police station stood ahead of us under bright lights. Patrol cars, security cameras, officers walking in and out. Victor D. leaned forward in the back seat of my car. You know where to go. Yes. You have 30 minutes. He leaned closer. Don't forget who's waiting here. I didn't. Tyler was sitting in the SUV behind us, Marco watching him like a hawk. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the station. Every step felt heavier than the last, because technically, I was walking into a police building while cooperating with drug traffickers. But Victor didn't know one very important thing. The moment I stepped through those doors, I walked straight up to the front desk officer. I need to speak with a detective, I said quietly. The officer looked up. About what? I leaned closer and lowered my voice. A kidnapping. 15 minutes later, I was sitting in a small interview room. Detective Ramirez, the same officer from the night before, stared at me across the table. You're telling me, he said slowly, that the men who took your friend are currently sitting 2 blocks away? Yes. And they believe you're about to steal evidence for them? Yes. He leaned back in his chair. Well, that's a new one. I rubbed my forehead. You already have the drugs, right? Ramirez nodded. They were moved to the county forensic lab this morning. Perfect. Exactly what I hoped. They think it's still here, I said. Ramirez smiled slightly. That works in our favor. He stood up and walked to the door. Stay here. Within minutes, the hallway outside filled with movement. Officers, radios, quiet but urgent conversations, because Victor and his crew had just walked straight into a trap. 30 minutes later, sirens exploded outside the building. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. I rushed to the front entrance. Police vehicles surrounded the street, officers shouting commands. Marco and the third man were already face down on the pavement. Victor stood beside the SUV with his hands slowly raised. And Tyler. Tyler was standing behind a patrol car looking completely stunned. The moment he saw me, he shouted, "Daniel!" I ran over. An officer cut the zip tie around his wrists. Tyler rubbed them, still trying to process everything. You called the cops? He asked. I nodded. About 15 minutes ago. He stared at me, then suddenly laughed in disbelief. I thought we were dead. Me too. Across the street, officers were placing Victor into the back of a police cruiser. He glanced at me one last time through the window. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look calm. He looked furious. 3 weeks later, Tyler and I sat at a small diner near my apartment. Life was finally starting to feel normal again. Victor's operation had turned out to be bigger than anyone expected. Multiple arrests, drug trafficking charges, federal investigation. Tyler had agreed to testify. In exchange for cooperating, the prosecutors were offering him a much lighter sentence. Still serious consequences, but not the life-destroying kind he'd been facing. Tyler stared down at his coffee. I almost got you killed, he said quietly. I shrugged. You also got me one hell of a story. He laughed softly. Then he looked up. Why did you help me? I thought about that for a moment. Then I said the truth. Because 12 years of friendship doesn't disappear because someone made a terrible mistake. Tyler nodded slowly. I'm never borrowing your car again. I smirked. Probably a good idea. And for the first time since that phone call on Tuesday night, everything finally felt like it was going to be okay.